June 17, 1949, 42 p.m. Lenox Avenue was burning. 3 buildings, all of them owned by Italian interests, flames climbing into the Harlem sky like orange fingers reaching for God. Fire trucks screamed through the streets. Crowds gathered on corners, watching, whispering. Everyone knew what this meant. War had come to Harlem. 6 blocks away, in the back room of a pool hall on 137th Street, Bumpy Johnson sat across from Vito Genovese's underboss, a man named Carmine Three Fingers DeLuca. Between them lay a body, fresh, still bleeding. One of Carmine's soldiers, a young enforcer named Paulie Batts, who'd made the mistake of pulling a gun in Bumpy Johnson's territory. Carmine's face was pale. His hands were shaking. He'd come to Harlem with 12 men to deliver an ultimatum. Now one of those men was dead on the floor, and Carmine was beginning to understand that the ultimatum had been a very bad idea. Bumpy hadn't moved from his chair. His suit was spotless. His expression was calm, almost bored, like a man waiting for his coffee to arrive. "You wanted to talk," Bumpy said. "So talk." Carmine swallowed hard. "This wasn't supposed to happen. The deal is dead," Bumpy interrupted. His voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a razor. "Just like Paulie. Just like anyone else who thinks they can walk into my neighborhood and make demands." He leaned forward, and for the first time, Carmine saw something in Bumpy's eyes that made his blood run cold. "You go back to Vito. You tell him what you saw here tonight. You tell him Harlem is burning, and it won't stop burning until he understands one thing." Bumpy paused. "We are not his property. What nobody knew, what history won't tell you, is that those fires weren't the beginning of the war. They were the end of it." Bumpy Johnson had been fighting this battle for 3 months, ever since a deal that was supposed to bring peace to Harlem turned into a death sentence for everyone who trusted it. And by the time Lenox Avenue burned, Bumpy had already won. He just needed Vito Genovese to know it. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about power in Harlem. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand what Harlem looked like in 1940 and why the Italian mob thought they could finally take what they'd been wanting for years. It was 5 years after Dutch Schultz caught those bullets in Newark. The Dutchman's death had left a vacuum, and the 5 families had spent half a decade trying to fill it. Lucky Luciano was running things from prison, but his grip was slipping. Vito Genovese was making moves, positioning himself for power, and he had his eyes on one prize above all others: Harlem's numbers racket. By 1940, the numbers game was generating $30 million a year. $30 million flowing through the streets of Harlem in nickels, dimes, and quarters. Poor folks betting on dreams, and Bumpy Johnson collecting every penny. He'd taken over from Madame Queen 3 years earlier, building an empire that the Italians couldn't penetrate, couldn't corrupt, couldn't control. And it was driving them crazy. Here's what you need to understand about Bumpy Johnson in 1940. He was 34 years old in the prime of his power. He'd survived Dutch Schultz. He'd survived 3 prison terms. He'd survived assassination attempts from every direction. The man had built something in Harlem that went beyond a criminal enterprise. He'd built a kingdom. When black businesses needed protection, Bumpy provided it. When families couldn't pay rent, Bumpy covered it. When the police got too rough, Bumpy made phone calls that made the roughness stop. He wasn't just a gangster to Harlem. He was a shield, standing between his community and everyone who wanted to exploit it. The Italian mob had tried everything to break him. Force hadn't worked. Bribery hadn't worked. They'd tried turning his own people against him, and those people had ended up in the East River. By 1940, the 5 families had one option left: negotiation. That's when Vito Genovese made his move. March 1940. Vito sent word through intermediaries that he wanted to talk. Not threats, not ultimatums. A genuine business proposal. A deal that would benefit everyone. The message came through a lawyer named Solomon Katz, a Jewish fixer who worked with both black and Italian operations. Katz was neutral ground, trusted by both sides. "Vito wants peace," Katz told Bumpy in a meeting at Small's Paradise. "He's proposing a partnership, 50-50 split on all Harlem operations. You run the day-to-day, his people handle distribution, banking, political protection. Everyone makes more money, nobody gets hurt. Bumpy listened without expression. And what does Vito get out of this partnership? Legitimacy, access. The Italians have been trying to crack Harlem for 20 years. This way they get a peace without the war. A peace. Bumpy's voice was flat. They get a piece of something they didn't build, didn't bleed for, didn't earn. And I'm supposed to be grateful. Cat spread his hands. I'm just the messenger. Vito says he's willing to negotiate the percentages. 40-60 maybe. You'd still be in control. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised everyone in the room. Set up a meeting, I'll hear what Vito has to say. Illinois Gordon, Bumpy's closest advisor, pulled him aside after Katz left. You can't be serious. Vito Genovese is a snake. Any deal he offers is a trap. Bumpy nodded slowly. I know exactly what Vito is. That's why I want to hear his proposal. I want to know what he's really planning. And if it is a trap, Bumpy's eyes were cold. Then I'll know who to kill. March 22, 1940. The meeting took place at a restaurant in Midtown Neutral Territory. Vito Genovese came with 6 men. Bumpy came with 4. They sat at opposite ends of a long table, 2 kings sizing each other up. Vito was smooth, charming, all smiles and handshakes. He talked about mutual respect, about the future of business in New York, about how much they could accomplish together. The old ways are dying, Vito said, swirling wine in his glass. The days of fighting over territory, killing each other over nickels and dimes, those days are over. The smart money is in cooperation. You have Harlem, I have connections. Together we could build something that lasts. Bumpy listened. He asked questions. He appeared to consider the offer. By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed to a trial partnership. 60-40, Bumpy's favor. The Italians would provide banking services and political protection. Bumpy would continue running operations. They'd revisit the arrangement in 6 months. They shook hands. Vito smiled like a man who just won the lottery, and Bumpy went home to prepare for war. Here's what Vito Genovese didn't know. Here's what nobody at that table suspected. Bumpy Johnson had a source inside the Genovese organization. A man named Enzo Carlucci, a mid-level earner who'd been feeding Bumpy information for 2 years. Enzo had a gambling problem and debts he couldn't pay. Bumpy had bought those debts and turned Enzo into his eyes and ears inside the Italian mob. 3 days after the meeting in Midtown, Enzo called Bumpy with news that changed everything. The partnership is a setup, Enzo said, his voice shaking. Vito's playing you. The deal is real for the first 3 months. He wants you to integrate your operations with his, share your routes, your contacts, your people. Once he has all that information, he's going to move against you. How? Bumpy asked. He's bringing in soldiers from Chicago, 30 men, maybe more. They're going to hit you all at once. Take out your lieutenants, seize your operations, and either kill you or force you out. He's been planning this for 6 months. Bumpy was silent for a long moment. When? June. He wants to give you 3 months to get comfortable, let your guard down, then he strikes. Bumpy thanked Enzo and hung up. Then he called a meeting with his most trusted men. The partnership is a trap, Bumpy told them. Vito plans to use the next 3 months to map our entire operation, then destroy us. Illinois Gordon cursed. I knew it. I told you that snake couldn't be trusted. You were right, Bumpy said. But now we have something Vito doesn't know we have. We have time and we have information. So what do? Asked Junie Bayad. Pull out of the deal, hit him first. Bumpy shook his head. If we pull out now, Vito just tries again later. If we hit him first, we start a war we might not win. No, we play along. We give Vito exactly what he wants. We let him think he's winning. And then, Bumpy's smile was cold. And then we make sure that when he finally makes his move, he's walking into a slaughter. For 3 months, Bumpy played the part of a man falling into a trap. He shared information with Vito's people, but not real information. Routes that led nowhere. Safe houses that were actually empty buildings. Names of lieutenants who were actually soldiers with nothing to lose. At the same time, Bumpy was preparing. He stockpiled weapons. He recruited new soldiers, men Vito didn't know about, men who weren't on any list. He identified every Italian asset in Harlem, every business, every warehouse, every property that Vito's people owned or used, and he waited. June 15, 1940. Enzo called with the news Bumpy had been expecting. It's happening. 2 days. Vito's bringing in 20 soldiers from Chicago. They're going to hit 5 locations at once. Your office at Small's Paradise, your warehouse on 127th, your lieutenant's homes. They want to take you out in one coordinated strike. And Vito, he's sending Carmine DeLuca to deliver an ultimatum the night before. Give up the operation peacefully or die. It's a formality. Vito knows you'll refuse. He just wants to say he gave you a chance. Bumpy hung up and smiled. 3 months of patience were about to pay off. June 17, 1940. Carmine Three Fingers DeLuca arrived in Harlem at 9:00 p.m. with 12 soldiers. They came to the pool hall on 137th Street where Bumpy was waiting. Carmine walked in like he owned the place. He sat down across from Bumpy and laid out Vito's terms. Surrender the numbers operation. Leave New York. Take whatever money he could carry and disappear. Otherwise, tomorrow would be the last day of his life. Bumpy listened to every word, then he laughed. You think I don't know what's coming tomorrow? You think I've spent 3 months sharing information with Vito without knowing exactly what he planned to do with it? Carmine's confident expression flickered. What are you talking about? The 20 soldiers from Chicago, the 5 simultaneous hits, the coordinated strike. Bumpy leaned forward. I've known about it for 3 months, Carmine. Since before the ink was dry on our partnership agreement. Carmine's face went pale. While Vito thought he was mapping my operation, I was mapping his. I know every asset he has in Harlem, every warehouse, every business, every safe house. Bumpy's voice dropped to a whisper. And right now, while you're sitting here delivering ultimatums, my people are burning them all to the ground. As if on cue, the distant sound of sirens began to wail. Then another. Then another. Carmine stood up, panic in his eyes. One of his soldiers, a young hothead named Paulie Batts, drew his gun. He never got to use it. 2 of Bumpy's men materialized from the shadows and put him down before he could even aim. Paulie's body hit the floor. His blood began to pool on the concrete. Carmine looked at the body, then at Bumpy, then at the door. His remaining soldiers were frozen, realizing they were surrounded, outmanned, outmaneuvered. You wanted to talk, Bumpy said. So talk. Carmine's voice shook. This wasn't supposed to happen. The deal is dead, just like Paulie, just like anyone else who thinks they can walk into my neighborhood and make demands. Bumpy stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was standing over Carmine. You go back to Vito. You tell him what you saw here tonight. You tell him Harlem is burning and it won't stop burning until he understands one thing. Bumpy paused, his eyes boring into Carmine's soul. We are not his property. Carmine and his surviving soldiers left Harlem that night in silence. They drove through streets lit by flames, past fire trucks and police cars, past the smoldering ruins of everything Vito Genovese had built in Harlem. By morning, the damage was catastrophic. 6 Italian-owned properties destroyed, 4 warehouses, 2 legitimate businesses used for laundering money. Vito's entire Harlem infrastructure, 3 years of careful investment, reduced to ashes in a single night. And the 20 soldiers from Chicago, they arrived the next morning to find nothing. No targets, no locations. Bumpy's people had melted into the neighborhood like ghosts. The safe houses were empty. The office at Small's Paradise was cleared out. There was nothing to hit, no one to kill. The war was over before it even started. Vito Genovese called an emergency meeting with the other family heads. He wanted retaliation. He wanted soldiers sent into Harlem, wanted Bumpy Johnson hunted down and executed. Frank Costello spoke first. You tried to trap him. You spent 3 months planning a coordinated strike, and he knew about it the entire time. He played you, Vito. He let you think you were winning, and then he burned everything you had. That doesn't mean we let it stand, Vito snarled. Means exactly that, said another boss. Johnson didn't start a war, he finished one. A war you started when you tried to take his operation through deception. Every family at this table has tried to crack Harlem. Every family has failed. At what point do we accept that Bumpy Johnson is not a man we can beat? The vote was unanimous. No retaliation. Harlem was off limits, permanently. Word spread through New York's underworld within days. Bumpy Johnson had outplayed Vito Genovese. He'd known about the trap from the beginning. He'd spent 3 months feeding false information while mapping every Italian asset in his territory. And when Vito finally made his move, Bumpy had destroyed everything in a single night without losing a single soldier. The message was devastating. You cannot outthink Bumpy Johnson. You cannot outplan him. You cannot trap a man who sees every move before you make it. Bumpy Johnson lived another 28 years after that night. He saw the Italian mob's power rise and fall. He saw Harlem change in ways he never expected. But that night in June 1940, when he turned Vito Genovese's trap into a bonfire, that was the night he proved something that every gangster in New York already feared. Bumpy Johnson didn't just survive traps, he used them. He let his enemies build elaborate plans, let them think they were winning, and then turn their own strategies into weapons against them. Because here's the lesson, the one Vito Genovese learned too late. In a war between brute force and intelligence, intelligence wins every time. Vito had more men, more money, more connections. Bumpy had patience, information, and the willingness to wait 3 months for the perfect moment to strike. He didn't just win the battle. He made sure there would never be another one. Look, if this story hit different, if you understand why Bumpy Johnson's name still commands respect nearly a century later, hit that like button right now. And if you're not subscribed, you're missing out because we're dropping these stories regularly, and the next one is even crazier than this. Drop a comment and let me know, would you have played along for 3 months? Would you have had the patience to let your enemy think he was winning? And turn those notifications on because next time, we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson walked into a police precinct to bail out a friend and walked out with the police captain begging for forgiveness. You don't want to miss that. Remember, in Harlem, traps were just opportunities in disguise, and Bumpy Johnson never missed an opportunity.